Almost 10 years ago, I made a video called Why I Am a Feminist. A lot has changed in the world since then. I have changed a lot since then as well. I've had many more life experiences, met many different kinds of people, and continue to read and gain knowledge in a wide variety of subject areas. Back then, my focus was on women in literature, since as a comparative literature major, that was really the only field in which I felt I could call myself an expert. While I still remain most familiar with the craft of writing, I have also learned a great deal from others who are experts in their respective fields, whether that be psychology, biology, sociology, or history, etc. I have also learned much from speaking and interacting with people that don't have a specialized college education, but who have had life experiences that are equally eye-opening and edifying in their own right. So, 10 years later, do I still identify as a feminist? Well, yes, of course. Now, I really don't think it's a controversial thing to call oneself a feminist, but I think the word remains charged in a different way than other labels. There are even some people on the left of the political spectrum that have a mocking attitude or tone towards male feminists. I'll explain the reasons why I think this is the case later, but suffice it for now to focus on the definition of the word rather than the connotation in popular discourse. Feminism simply means acknowledging that women face on a daily basis both interpersonal and systemic instances of sexism. Being a feminist, therefore, means doing everything one can to lessen these instances of sexism that women are forced to encounter. The evidence that this is the case is simply too clear to deny. Look at workplaces in the US and how often women, let's say as waitresses, are groped and sexually harassed by customers or even managers, with little done to address or remedy the situation. Additionally, we think of intersectional feminism, recognizing that women of different races and cultural backgrounds experience sexism in different ways. To add to this, I would add what is colloquially called pretty privilege, in which less conventionally attractive women are treated more poorly on the whole than other women. A very attractive, young, blonde white woman from a wealthy middle-class family is much less likely to be treated badly in the United States than an unattractive, older Mexican working-class woman, for example. Now, once again, these things are very clear, very observable facts. If you deny that women experience sexism on a daily basis, then you're denying reality. But there are plenty of people who don't deny that it exists, but simply believe that it is either impossible to change, that sexist behaviors such as catcalling are an unchangeable facet of male biology and therefore something that women should simply put up with. Or they believe that change is only possible for individuals who stand up for themselves and persist despite whatever bigotry they happen to encounter in life. To put it in another way, they believe that girl bossing your way through it will, separate the wheat from the chaff. The women that are, just deal with it, just become go-getters, despite the, because sexism just isn't that big of a deal for them. It is not worth my nor your time to argue with people who don't acknowledge that sexism exists, because they are either too stupid or too selfish to see the plain reality all around us. I will instead put forth an argument against people who believe that the sexism we experience is unchangeable. Now, to return briefly to intersectional feminism, I believe that certain strains of feminism run the risk of favoring the needs and desires of a particular group of women that might already be privileged in many other ways and for many other reasons. It calls to mind the conundrum of affirmative action, where opportunities to a group of people who have been historically oppressed due to their race, they are given additional opportunities. But we have to ask, so should all Latino or Black students be weighed equally? Is someone from a wealthy immigrant family from Argentina or Peru going to get preferential treatment because of their race, the same way a fourth-generation Mexican-American whose family has grown up in an impoverished part of East LA? In a similar way, do programs that grant scholarships or, girl boss style participation in the business and political world inherently favor women of a certain demographic, i.e. white, young, attractive, middle-class women? These are questions worth asking. Systemic remedies Of course, to cultural problems are always going to be an easy target for reactionary demagogues because they invariably create other, smaller injustices as a side effect of their attempt to address the larger injustice. Surely you've seen a number of news stories about 4.0 GPA, white student with many volunteer positions and extracurricular activities. And in the photos we see of her, 9 times out of 10, she's also blonde, affluent, and pretty, who was denied a spot at the colleges she applied to, while some students of color with perhaps a lower GPA were accepted. These sorts of stories invariably fuel middle class indignation and serve to turn people against systemic attempts to address past injustices. The reactionary outrage machine, the right wing outrage machine, in the last 10 years since I have made my original Why I'm a Feminist video, has only become more well oiled, efficient, and annoying. Online algorithms help people find their niche content and continue to feed them a bevy of such content precisely designed to appeal to the most base and inflammatory of their emotions. A dry intellectual analysis of the situation at large, such as the one you're listening to now, carries little appeal when it's competing against inflammatory discourse designed specifically to incite strong emotions, with clickbait headlines and visually garish thumbnails. I can't help but come to the conclusion that the only way to make a difference in the discourse and make some positive impact on the next generation is to resort to this exaggerated style of commentary that sees the world as black and white, sees those who disagree with you as your enemy. Now, that has never been my style, of course. I'll continue to be, as I have been, empathetic towards the human condition at large, specifically towards women and people of color and anyone else who is oppressed. It doesn't matter who or why or what group it is. Any instance of oppression that I see in front of me, I'm going to do my best to speak out against and stop when I can. I'm a feminist because when I see someone being treated like shit, my natural instinct is to do what I can to stop that from happening. In the playground at my school when I was a kid, I was always getting into fights with bullies who were picking on the more vulnerable kids. Of course, I would get in trouble for starting these fights, but I do not hesitate to say that it brought me an unreasonable amount of joy to punch playground bullies in the face. Have I learned to resort to more discursive means of resolving conflicts as I've gotten older? Not really. Just last year, I punched a man who was telling a woman to stay in her place and then calling her a bitch when she continued to talk back to him. I will never, ever allow an instance of sexism, or racism for that matter, to pass in front of me without action on my part. Now, is violence a foolish way of addressing these problems? Perhaps. But I grew up in a violent household, and violence is the language I know best. Far better than the kind of language I'm speaking to you here and now. Is that very toxic masculine of me? Perhaps. But I will say that being a feminist does not mean that you believe the sexes are entirely equal. This, too, would be a simple denial of reality. Men are clearly, on the whole, stronger than women, more capable of doing harm with their bodies than women. And this is why I believe men have an obligation to protect women, physically. To me, a man who uses his greater strength to abuse or attack the weaker sex is the most despicable kind of person. I don't mind opening doors for women because my physical body, the strength that I possess, is itself a kind of privilege that very few women will ever feel in their entire lifetimes. Add to this the burdens of pregnancy and childbirth, besides the high expectation women have to maintain their appearance via makeup, long hair, and less comfortable clothing, then I think, among other things that women have to deal with that men don't, besides having your period every month, I think anything one can do as a man to lessen these burdens for a woman is a sign of respect and civility. Of course, being polite to women in this way is the bare minimum one can and should be expected to do. Much more important is the active resistance to instances of sexism or belittlement that you find in the street or the workplace. Another fight I got into a couple of years ago was when I told a man to stop catcalling a woman at the scene of a car accident, of all places. Usually, the instances of sexism that you will encounter are not so dramatic and public, of course. And many of them you will not be witness to, because of course misogynists don't really attack women when another man is in their presence. This is why it's so important to believe women when they tell stories of, sexism and harassment and such, because predators will prey on the weak and the vulnerable, and those, 99.9% of catcalling happens when a woman is walking alone rather than when she's with a man or a group of people. But, less dramatic instances would be women being talked down to or not taken seriously in the workplace. I had a friend who was a scientist, and very good at her job, but she was constantly fighting for attention or to be heard at meetings or to even taken seriously by people who she was in a superior position to. Simply because, a lot of people still, not consciously, but underneath, subconsciously believe that women should not be scientists, or they're not good at science or mathematics or their STEM fields as men, and so can be lectured to and spoken to in an infantile way. So that remains my brief call to arms. Of course, there's a lot more to be said, but in an effort to keep this video shorter than the last one, I'm going to end it here and welcome comments and discussions, and perhaps I'll make, a series of videos addressing other things such as gender roles and the harm that can play in society. But overall, I think the issue of calling oneself a feminist is very simple. Just a matter of acknowledging injustice and being willing to speak out against it. That's really all it is, and it doesn't need to be. Oh, and I forgot to address why I believe that even people on the left kind of seem skeptical or mock people who say they're male feminists. I think it's because people have a very strong emotional reaction when things are related to sex and sexual attraction, because people seem very unable to remove themselves emotionally from any given situation. And obviously the things, instances of injustice that I see, I think that's an instinctual reaction. I think most people would have that reaction if they have any sort of healthy working brain. And I wouldn't really classify that as an emotional reaction because it's so instinctual. It's the same way that you feel hunger. You wouldn't really call hunger an emotion. Same way you see injustice, you want to prevent it. That doesn't seem like an emotion to me. But because so many people have emotions around, gender specifically, gender roles, and that there is certainly a very high amount of respect or praise given to men, for behaving in certain ways. I think the skepticism against men being feminist is like as if they're doing it because they sympathize so much with women. They empathize with their pain, and they, for any time a man expresses emotions, like I think especially online and just in general, American culture is like very enabled to be sincere with their feelings. They express almost everything in terms of irony and caging it in sarcasm and things like that. So the idea of like seeing a man like being sincere in his emotions rather than like joking or witty in response to a situation is I think a huge reason why so many men are afraid to call themselves feminists, because it belies like some kind of weakness or vulnerability, like and then this is across the board, like a man could wear a dress, but as long as he's acting masculine while he's wearing that dress, it's fine. But like femininity, in men seems to be just so hard for people to accept for whatever reason. And so for me, it's like, it's not about the plight of women, because there's many terrible people out there, including women. I mean, being a part of a vulnerable group, a group that has historically been the target of injustice, does not make you a good person. Being a part of that group, you could be also a piece of shit perpetuating injustice within that group. You could be a toxic woman putting down other women, whatever instance of any group. I mean, there's bad and good people within any demographic. So you know, my that's why I'm kind of trying to de-emphasize the chargedness and the importance of calling oneself a feminist, because it's like not really that, you know, I don't want to uplift all women, because some women are terrible, some humans are terrible. And I think it's just another, you know, clear observation of reality, that to deny that is to deny reality as such. And so, you know, really, all I want is for everyone to be given equal opportunity, so that we can have people who might not know, you know, and this still goes back to the point I made in my video 10 years ago, that women, we've lost so many great works by women because they were not allowed to write. They were not allowed to, you know, be on stage as actors in Shakespeare's time and all this kind of thing. So we've lost, you know, stuff that can contribute to our culture and make our culture better and more interesting. Same with Black people, you know, how many great works and novels from, you know, early America have we lost because Black people were literally not allowed to be free, or not allowed to, you know, not given opportunity to go to schools like Harvard and whatnot. So that's what it's about for me, is like creating a culture in which, you know, geniuses have an opportunity just the same way, and not held back by their race or their sex. Because you know, I couldn't care less, quite frankly, about, you know, horrible people being elevated because of they happen to be a part of a certain group, so historically oppressed demographic. Like, no, if you're a horrible person, I don't want you to participate in society, or whatever. I mean, you can participate, but like, stay away from me and my people that I admire. But you know, it's kind of besides the point. Oh yeah, and then, you know, so, and I think actually a book, and they've turned it into an HBO series that illustrates this point perfectly, is My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante, which tells the story of two girls, you know, growing up in mid-century in Italy, and one of them is denied the ability to go to college, or to go to even middle school, much less college, and, you know, forced to work at home, and then expected to get married at a young age and, you know, have a child, because that's what women are supposed to do. Whereas her friend Elena, um, uh, she's able to go on because her family just happens to make this slightly more progressive decision to let her go to school, and she struggles still with a lot of things related to sexism and classism and such, but she manages to get through it, and, you know, becomes a professor and all these things. While the other friend, who was not only arguably, but very clearly more brilliant, kind of a genius in many ways, artistic, creative, you know, both good at math, all these things. She's, you know, not able to live her full life, and her life kind of ends tragically because, literally, because sexism and classism. Um, so, you know, it's a great novel series. It's wonderfully written, very real. It's worth reading, but the HBO series is also very good. They're on the second season now, so I highly encourage you to check that out and see, like, literally the instance of what I'm talking about, because, you know, in the book itself you see a lot of annoying, obnoxious women that wouldn't have done anything with their additional, you know, privileges. Maybe they would have, I don't know, but the novel focuses on the two characters that, like, you know, we've suffered a loss in our society, in our culture, because of sexism, because there's denied, you know, someone with a clear ability, much more ability than her brother, for example, but because of an accident of her gender and her genitalia, she's not denied that, or she's denied that the opportunities. Um, so yeah, that's all I'll have. That's all I'll say for now in this video. This climactic part 2, um, celebrating 10 years of being a feminist, and hopefully 10 more years without, you know, without obnoxious comments about what it means to be a male feminist. Thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you again soon. Stay safe out there, but not too safe. Also, be willing to fight against injustice. It requires sometimes not being 100% safe, so be brave. Let's say that. Be brave. Thank you.